You are watching Tech and AI Live. Now we have a great presentation coming up with Sergio Fernandez Mena, VP of Digital Technologies at YPF. His presentation is titled Digital Agenda 2022 to 2026. In his over 20-year career, Sergio has successfully created and led multicultural work teams and held various positions that include Global IT Executive Director for Latin America, North America, Europe, and Asia. In his previous roles at Cargill's Global CIO for the Food Ingredients and Bioindustrial Enterprise, he has led the development of the IT Global Strategy and the Processes, Data and Technology Global Strategy, and he was also a member of the Global IT Executive Committee. Welcome, Sergio. It's great to have you here. Hi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I am, as you can probably see in the background, I'm in Buenos Aires. This is YPF's headquarters in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And very glad to spend some time with you and share about our journey, the so-called YPF's digital agenda. So basically, I'm going to go over three main themes. First, we're going to go through a video. This year, we are celebrating our first 100 years of operations in Argentina, YPF. And this is a kind of a short video which aims to condense the whole story of YPF. Then I'm going to get into some sort of a nutshell synthesis of what we're talking about when we talk about digital technologies in YPF. And lastly, we're going to get into YPF's digital agenda. So let's go with the video first.
Las actividades de YPF se desarrollan al ritmo de su constante y vertiginoso progreso.
Celebrating 100 years as a driving force for our heritage. We are leaders in energy, the engine of the country's economy. Founded in 1922 as an oil-producing company, we discovered gas, taking it to every home in Argentina. We built thermal power plants to drive growth and are now developing new technologies, working with lithium and electric mobility. YPF has opened the door to a whole new world, attracting international companies as strategic partners in Vaca Muerta. We are leading the development of Vaca Muerta, achieving world-class competitiveness and revolutionizing the conventional approach to the oil business by applying cutting-edge technologies. We are developing the fuels of the future, raising the standard for a better and more environmentally friendly performance. We created Profertil, the most important granulated urea company in Latin America, supplying fertilizers to the Argentine farmers. In addition, we provide essential supplies for developing its production. Our focus is on producing safe, reliable, and sustainable energy, leading the response to the challenge of transitioning towards lower carbon economies. With the creation of YPF Luz, we are pursuing an ambitious renewable energy plan and building wind farms across the country. Together with CONICET, we created YTEC, Argentina's largest applied research center and one of the top 5 in Latin America. YTEC has 47 laboratories developing new solutions for energy transformation. We are leading the H2R Consortium, doing research in the hydrogen value chain. We work every day to improve our customer experience, offering speedier and more efficient services. We have the largest customer loyalty program in the country. We have been an intrinsic part of the lives of Argentinians for 100 years. That is our energy. We started out as pioneers, and our goal is to continue leading the way.
So what we saw before was an attempt to condense 100 years of operations in Argentina. And as you probably saw and captured there, YPF is a pretty large company. We operate in different areas, all the way from the upstream, which is the area where we explore and extract and transport gas and oil, and basically all the way down to the downstream side, going through refineries, and finally our service stations or gas stations, pump stations, whatever you call it in the different countries. Now, if we stay on the downside of, on the downstream side of the business, our service stations are more than simply a pump station or a gas station. Actually, it's a pretty large network of retail shops. And as you can see in the box in the middle of this slide, we're attending those retail shops, which are physically located in our service stations, and this is more than 1,600 service stations across the country. So this is a retail business, and we have an application that our customers can use and go and not only fuel or refuel using gasoline or whatever, but also go to our local shop and buy either coffee or hamburger. In fact, YPF is the #1 vendor of seller actually of coffee in the country, and depending on the month, we are ranking #2 or 3 in terms of quantity of hamburgers sold, right? So it's a quite diverse business, and from a technology standpoint, we're dealing with all sorts of requirements. I mean, going from the retailers, as I was referring to, all the way down to or up actually to the upstream. We have more than 12,000 wells, and these are oil rigs, right? And in the middle of the Patagonia, the majority of them, so really remote locations, vast majority of them, particularly the totality of our unconventional business, the so-called Vaca Muerta area, is fully connected, fully telesupervised, and in some cases controlled remotely. So we have in the middle of the Patagonia these several thousand wells, and we have real-time connectivity. We also have tracks, not only on the upstream side, but also on the downstream side. So more than 3,000 tracks every day on the roads, and these are very remote roads, and all them, again, with the geolocalization, and we capture information in real time in order to, on one side, reassure that they are delivering the goods, many times it's gasoline, on time, in a safe manner, but also optimizing the planning. I mean, the road planning, the whole process required to reassure that we are not broken stocks and nobody is running short of fuel or whatever the product we're delivering. Now, in order to do all this, we have more than 86,000 square kilometers covered with telecommunications. This is what they call the area we are illuminating. And just to put this in perspective, 86,000 square kilometers is larger than Austria, the country. Now, majority of these links are, as I said, in very remote locations. And unfortunately, for at least at the moment, or for the moment, we couldn't find, the right telecom providers who are willing to operate with I would say, commercially affordable proposal in remote locations. Therefore, we have our own last mile supported by our own team, and this is basically 75% of the coverage. So pretty large environment. We've embarked into a journey going into the cloud, and we're moving aggressively there. The team made some really good steps forward, and we're aiming to have our goal, which is basically 75% or so of our total footprint on the cloud by the end of next year. And the reason we're not going 100% is due to some applications that are very intensive from a data consumption standpoint. Many of them are in the subsurface geological area, and latency is an issue there. So, and in some other cases, due to local legal regulations that are inhibiting us from putting some data outside the country. But all in all, 75% of our footprint is a pretty large and very aggressive goal. Now getting into the digital agenda. So the build of the digital agenda was and is still an all-hands exercise. This is one table for all the different areas in the company that we put under the umbrella of digital technologies. And when we talk digital technologies, in YPF, we're talking about data and analytics, OT, which stands for operations technology, IT, I mean, this is the standard IT, cybersecurity, business processes, and then the dimension of people and culture associated to the capabilities we need, to run the shop here. So we went initially through more than 20 sessions in order to initially build the agenda, and this was a few years ago. And more than 30 participants from the different areas I was referring to. And we keep this exercise live on a regular basis, I would say, with information. And later on, I'm going to give you a snapshot of our balanced scorecard. So on a weekly basis, we keep refreshing information. And on a monthly basis, we have an all-hands meeting with the whole team, and we make decisions based on that. So the key concepts that were included in the digital agenda are basically the ones showed in this slide. So first of all, why we do it, right? And the reason we do, and the reason we have a digital agenda is we need to define which are the places where we're going to spend the money, where we're going to invest on the digital technologies area in order to fulfill the business strategies and the business goals. So there's no such a thing as a digital technology investment in YPF that is not directly linked and driven by a business need, business strategy, business goal. So that's at the very core of the why. And the second reason why we need and we ran a digital agenda is because as a company, we want to continue increasing our digital maturity in order to be at par, if not leading, the industry on a global basis. Now, how do we do it? We do it through basically three main levers that we activate there. We have some strategic choices I'm going to refer to in the next slide. We also have focal areas and technological access, and I'm going to get there in a minute. What do we do is basically, as I said, we basically build and run and maintain and govern a portfolio over a period of time of 5 years, which is where we decide when we're going to do it. And this is a roadmap with different options that we call according to the needs of the business goals of that year. And how do we track? We track this through a combination of KPIs on one side. Value is the main, and we put a lot of attention and energy on the value side. I'm going to get that covered as well in a minute. And we measure the evolution of our digital maturity through the evolution of 6 attributes that we defined as part of our build of the digital agenda. So the digital agenda, as you can imagine, because this happens in every company, is the best attempt, to on one side to trace the future, and this is 5 years line of sight in our portfolio, while trying to navigate and compromise on the highly dynamic environment we all live on. And therefore, when we say this, in an ever-changing environment, we want to, and we need to equip our team with enough perspective in order to enable them to make the best decisions with the best information they have available at any moment. And therefore, we define these operating principles, which are acting as our lighthouse, right? So we clearly said that in order to make the right decisions, we will always prioritize our focus on speed to value. So we will always favor initiatives with shorter cycles, and in order to reduce the time to value, right? This is kind of an iterative, agile deployment. We also said we have critical capabilities that we will retain in-house, and this is, we continue revisiting this, obviously, because what was needed 3 or 5 years ago might not be needed, for the next 5 years. So those critical capabilities are and will be kept in-house. At the same time, we are leveraging the ecosystem. So we're going also with third-party vendors, typically through managed services. The delivery is, as I said, is kind of following the more than agile methodology that we certainly use. We put special emphasis on an agile mindset. That's where we're going to go to. And again, the full idea of how do we reduce the time to value through successive deliveries. I referred already to strategic vendor management. Last but not least, in this list, we decided that we are going to go with a full stack of digital technology solution for the whole company, as opposed to going by business units or whatever configuration. And the reason here is because we've learned over the time that many decisions that appear to be the best decision at this altitude level, when trying to get scaled or deployed at scale in a large and diverse company like ours, in many cases are not fully scalable, and therefore we end up, with suboptimal decisions and leaving money on the table. Therefore, that's the reason why we have an all hands on board here, the different areas of the company fully involved with the decisions and the governance of our digital agenda. So it's a systemic vision of digital technologies. Focal areas. This is where we basically define, the realization of the value of all the investments we made in our digital agenda. So we basically group the outcomes of our digital agenda in three main areas. So initiatives that are aimed to deliver value on the customer experience side, operations, and this is not only the typical operations, i.e. the industrial environment, but also operations in the administrative environment, like logical robots, RPI, right? On the other side, we have physical robots, like a robot we recently deployed in order to get into firefighting activities through some sort of a drone-like robot, right? So those are examples of deployment of digital technologies on the operations, both on admin side as well as the physical factories. Employee experience, when we talk about employee experience, we're talking about, again, not only the admin environment, clearly going through creation and collaboration enabled by digital technologies, but also the concept we've been working on and applying already, which we call the augmented operator. And this is augmenting the ability our operators, he or she has on the field. And this is a combination of augmented reality with artificial intelligence. And by the way, I don't really like the term artificial intelligence. I like to call it augmented intelligence, because by the use of algorithms, many of them developed in-house, we are facilitating the decision-making in some cases, and in some other cases, focusing the decision-making on less mechanical type of activities and more value-added type of activities. And at the bottom, we have digital platforms, and this is where we basically invest in both tools and capabilities in order to enable the value in the focal areas above. We also keep an eye on what we call the technological axis, and these are 10 axes we defined time ago in order to reassure that we're placing the bets in the right moment. So when we get it into the agenda, in the digital agenda, we also try to keep proper balance and reassuring that we're not underinvesting in certain areas while overinvesting probably in some other areas from a technological standpoint. And this is the last slide, and apologies in advance because most of the information is obfuscated, and the reason it is obfuscated is this is an actual snapshot of our dashboard. This is the way we manage our digital agenda on a daily basis. And the content is in Spanish, but you can probably recognize the slide we just saw before, the one with the green background there. Those are our technological access. And you can probably see that there are numbers, and those are the number of initiatives that we have at every moment in those axes. And again, this is 5 years line of sight. So as you can see, there are probably 241 initiatives, and these are, in many cases, are pretty large initiatives. Like you see cloud there, and you see 2 initiatives, but actually those are 2 programs, pretty large programs, right? So it's a logical way to encapsulate our investments. And then there are, on the sides in the middle, on the left, you see a graph we use with bubbles. And this is a dual axis. So in one axis, we have the value to be created or preserved over the time. And on the other one is the investments we're planning to make on the technological axis. And then if you move to the right, you see a similar graph. In this case is the value versus investment, but grouped by the focal areas I was referring to before. And you will see more than 3 areas here, because within, for instance, customer experience, we have subgroups, like 3 or 4 categories. And by the way, the size of the balloons there is an indicator of the number of initiatives we have. And then at the very bottom, there's a reference to the correlation between value and business goals. Actually, this is a pretty large list of very clearly articulated business goals, which are coming from the business strategies. These are normally part of the annual goals our vice presidents and executives in the company have. So there's a direct line of sight between that individual goal and the associated action on the digital agenda. And I rounded there in red. It's probably a little hard to read here, figures. And those are figures like 1, 2.5, 3. And those are X's. And X's actually is a ratio. So we're aiming in every investment we make to have a positive return on investment. And those are the X's, right? So we're clearly aiming in certain activities for returns as large as 30 X's, so 30 times the investment. And we're very strict in our financial measures. So what we're actually measuring here is the net present value over 5 years versus the investment required. And this is total investment, not only one-time investment, but also the ongoing costs. So the equation should always be, I would say, higher than 1. And with probably few exceptions, normally more on the replacements due to obsolescence, etc. But all in all, we're aiming to have the consolidated portfolio above 1x, which is basically the best way to manage investments as with any portfolio. Well, this was basically in a nutshell what we did with the digital agenda and where we are today. So thank you very much. And Catherine, probably there are some questions you would like me to get addressed.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for that, Sergio. It was really interesting. And yeah, we've had some questions come in from the audience, so we'll get straight into those so we can cover as many as possible. The first one is, what is the difference between a digital agenda and a technology strategy?
Okay. Well, different companies call technology strategy or eventually digital agenda to different things. In our case, first I need to make a probably personal statement, but also a statement that it is shared by the company. We don't believe in the existence of a technological strategy by itself. So the only reason why we have a technological strategy is because there's a business strategy. So the digital agenda is a couple of things. First of all is the best attempt to keep our business active and, I would say, competitive in a world that is increasingly digital. So the digital component is pervasive. It's everywhere. So it's a way to reassure that we're making at any moment the right decisions in order to support, or in many cases, lead initiatives on the business side. And also, as I mentioned before, the digital agenda is a portfolio. So it's a sum of optionalities over the time. And actually, I was referring to value before, and the way we calculate value is we have value affected by probabilities or confidence, if you want. So let's say we have a certain initiative that has a potential premium of $10 million. However, it might be a little bit later on the time, probably near 3 or 4, or we don't have, the full business case totally rounded. Therefore, our confidence level is probably relatively low, and therefore we penalize initially in the agenda by a fact, we call this the R value, R for risk value, using a methodology similar to the one we use, our oil and gas companies use in the exploration of resources. So it's basically probability of this premium, to actually happen. Obviously, as we get shorter, and definitely within the fiscal year, certainty has to be pretty high, and we operate with the normal, I'll say, practices, and we put confidence levels in the order of 10 or 20% maximum. But for larger view and higher risk, we could penalize up to 50 or 60% of the potential premium, right?
Okay, great. And you actually answered another one of the audience question in that, so that was brilliant. So I'll move on to one final one. I think we'll have time for one more question, and that's, considering the dynamics and pace at which digital technologies evolve, how do you plan for a portfolio with 5 years line of sight?
Well, that's quite a challenge, and that's why we think it is important to have the proper line of sight, and but also it's important to keep an eye on a quite frequent basis, because again, highly dynamic environment. For those of you who are close to the oil and gas industry or following the news, at least, due to the unfortunate events in related to war now, oil prices are going up, which is a totally different scenario than the one we had probably a year and a half or 2 years ago. And who knows how this scenario is going to look like in 2 years from now, right? And also when we go to the retail side, right, consumer dynamics and behaviors are ever changing as well. So that's why we created this concept of probability or confidence level I was referring to. And by the way, I was referring to value. And value in our digital agenda is not only the value we create or we aim to create, but also the value we preserve. Because many players are aimed to preserve value, and that is part of keeping the lights on or keeping the business running. What we did over time, and this is a continuous journey, and we continue maturing on this, is we continue refining ways to put a dollar sign or whatever the currency we use to the value preservation activities, because there's certainly value they are normally coming from practices more associated to risk management, and this is another way to help the company make the right decisions and prioritize at every moment. So in a nutshell, the dynamics of the digital agenda are, I would say, closely following the dynamics of our businesses, and the businesses are changing the strategies and their goals according to how the environment changes. So this is why we also need to have actually a very close interrelationship between the digital technologies organization and the business organization.
Thank you. Unfortunately, that is all we've got time for today, so I think we're going to have to wrap it up. But thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us today, Sergio. Really appreciate it, and it was really interesting.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And thank you to the audience for watching. Make sure you stay tuned to check out the rest of our speakers at Tech and AI Live.